Hello and welcome back guys to Sandustry episode 2, where we last time started a whole new playthrough. We dug up the first part of the underground, lifted it up with launchers and split it onto two belts with 1 pixel height each. Then they get launched up even further onto a filter that drops everything down except sand, which then goes into our washer and mixes with water to become wet sand. This for now is the end of our finished processing line and brings us to our shaker, gold storage and kind of big pile of everything, where we are gonna start off today because we really need some more space. So for some reason there's a lot of spores stuck on our shaker. We really should get rid of it because it clogs up nearly the whole shaker, which is really not good at all. So let's go ahead and build a filter that only blocks spore, because I would think at least that all the other materials should be fine. And with a small conveyor knob, new launchers and a bit more space on top, we should be really good to go. Now we only have to get rid of all these spores, of which I'm still kind of wondering how they got there, because I would at least have thought that they are lighter than the wet sand and therefore getting pushed up onto the wet sand and slide down just like the slag does. But it appears to be not the case. For now, let's at least start burning some slag, and I really want to try something new with the gold. At some point, rather sooner than later, I want to move the gold storage as well as the whole big storage pile on the right side underground. So to avoid moving the gold from the lowest tile of the gold pile by hand, I'm gonna go ahead and build a filter in the tile above and spend some gold by purchasing the kinetic slag press and the rocket launcher. Just like that, we got rid of the gold and can now freely place our conveyor belt. Also, plug back in our collectors and we are good to go. Let's light some on fire and look how our factory is doing on the left side, because we really want to start building our new shaker. But I guess that has to wait just another second, because we are running out of sand. So let's go ahead and do some mining first. And look what we found! It's scorch, which is really nice. We can shoot it to turn it into cinder and afterwards burn it to create some lava, with which we can actually automate our slag burning. And also later on our flour burning. But we are not quite at that point yet. So let's just build a small storage for our cinder down here. It won't bother us right now, and it will be really nice to have easy access to it once we need it. That size should be more than enough. Build a filter above that only lets cinder through, add a tiny bit of creativity, reconnect the launcher and build 2 launchers on the right side. Now we need to limit the flow to a maximum of 1 tile height, which is gonna be really important because especially cinder tends to be lighter than nearly everything else and therefore gets pushed up to the top of every pile and wouldn't be filtered out. Now that being done, we can go ahead and do some digging. We have unlocked our rocket launcher earlier, so why not take advantage of that too. Also, we want to make sure to keep an eye on the plug side, and every time we hit 500, we can upgrade the rate of fire for our gun. Here we go! Mining is so satisfying! And we also now have our gun fully upgraded. There hasn't even anything bad happened up here. So, we can go ahead and start building the shaker immediately. I at least want to attempt to make it somewhat compact, but also kind of good looking. So maybe for this time, I've never done that, we do the shaker reversed and continue by building the input from the falling material that we sorted out on the top left. Flush it up a bit with some zigzag because we didn't quite manage to build it right next to the other wall. We want to measure a bit more with the conveyor belt because there's not a lot of space to deal with. Oh, this is gonna be tricky. I can see it getting kind of tight, but we still gotta attempt to do it because if there's no challenge, what is this all about then? Let's go ahead. Some mixture of belts and launchers. Hopefully this throughput is gonna be enough. I can see us getting close. So at least the wet sand already manages to get on to the shaker. Now the challenge is gonna be how do we wanna close things up? So maybe the belt a bit further. A wall right there for now. And yeah, let's see if this gonna work. It appears to be very fine for now, but eventually we wanna cycle sand that is not getting shook back around and onto the shakers again, because this is like almost always the safe way I wanna go. I could also maybe build a belt that goes around the whole factory, which I kind of already do, but let's try to just process everything we put in. To get a better idea what height we are gonna need to go to, let's put the filter in that connects us to our input from the left side. Connect it with a belt and make sure that the filters are set correctly. Now we get to the really hard part. We somehow have to figure out how we wanna get the gold down to the bottom, the overflowing wet sand to the right, but also the slag to the left and mix it with the slag that is coming from the left. I would really like to avoid this, but let's try to plug in some filters. It really seems not to work at all. It's just all getting stuck. Speaking about getting stuck, it seems to be the case that we don't have enough throughput for the wet sand that is coming in. So let's adjust our throughput a little bit and build 2 launchers instead. With this small but very effective modification, we're gonna make sure that there's always gonna be enough room for the wet sand to go. Let's watch it for a bit, because although it may not seem to get unstuck immediately, it should very much be enough throughput. And eventually it will sort itself out. In the meantime, we can start to think about how we want to sort this crossroad system out. I would say let's start with some filters that only block slag. So we're gonna make sure that only slag is gonna get transported to the left and into the burner. Let's give it a kinda nice look just for the moment, because I'm not quite sure if we can keep it. Build a filter that goes to the right, that blocks wet sand, to eventually get it launched up on the right side and back into the cycle. And wow, there already is a lot of overflowing sand. So maybe we really have to overthink this another time and build our shaker a bit longer. Although the overflow got mainly caused by the wet sands that got stuck because we didn't have enough launcher, we can now guarantee that this shaker will always be able to unclog itself. Just adding a few of my beloved half blocks here and there, and use a filter that only blocks slag. To give it 3 tiles height should be very much enough. Adding a bit of blockage for the downfalling gold, and try to catch the wet sand that is gonna fall through, just in case there's too much wet sand coming through. Seal it off with some filters that only allow slag through. That should do the trick, right? Now we can actually finish the loop of the wet sand that gets cycled around down below and launched back up on the right again. May not be working the best, but seems to be working just fine for now. I am pretty satisfied right now, because finally it seems to be working, it's really compact and not looking too bad. Why not go ahead then and work on the input of slag that is coming from the left side, after quickly double checking if the filters are set correctly. We can also try to make it even more compact by reducing the belt to 1 tile height, because, at least in theory, it should never be the case that there's more than 2 pixels of slag coming through at any time. Let's add a launcher at the end to hopefully secure that the slag is moving fast enough. I think it's time now to block off the factory for just a second, until we finish to build our slag burners, because it would be a huge struggle to get the cinder in there and burn it while all the slag is moving over it. To avoid building 2 burners on multiple floors, I'm gonna try to build them next to each other. For that I'm using filters that only let cinder through, followed by a belt to block the lava off. At least most, if not all slag should be burned by now. So we put a filter there that only allows burnt slag through. Like that we make sure that the remaining slag gets burned by the second pool of lava. And just to make it very safe that everything is getting burned, we are adding a filter at the end that blocks slag. Very well timed. Our factory is nearly empty. Let's pick up the rest of the slag by hand and fill in the missing gaps. We can now start to fill in the cinder, and once filled up, we can burn it down to lava. I also just realized that we got very lucky that we made our little storage box for cinder. Because due to Insane Asylum's ash mod that I'm using, nearly every single pixel of cinder would have already turned into red sand on our shaker on the right side, like this one. We won't have this problem with our new shaker anymore because no cinder is getting near it. So maybe we should get rid of the old shaker rather sooner than later. And go ahead and do it right after we finished our burners. I really want to make sure that I burn every single pixel of cinder into lava, just in case that the cinder is getting pulled out by the slag that's going over it. Because if that happens, the lava would start disappearing and the slag would no longer be burned, which could very likely cause the whole factory to collapse. So let's not further jinx it, open up the factory and see if everything's working. Washer still working fine, although no surprise because we didn't change anything there. Now coming up to the shaker, and we can see the first slag is going through and getting burned, no problem whatsoever. Considering everything's working just fine, let's go ahead and build a belt that will transport the burnt slag to the slag press. Also make sure to connect it to the input of the burnt slag that we already produced and gonna have to get rid of later. The factory is getting really filled up again, which is mainly because I blocked it off at the wrong spot. If I had blocked it off further on the left side, right where the flow limiters are, but instead, due to me blocking it off right above the washer, the whole space between these two got filled up with pixels that led to much higher throughput than we would actually have. So it's basically just a stress test for the whole factory. If we build everything correctly, the factory should be able to balance everything out again, all by itself. For some reason the slag is not moving fast enough, so maybe we should make some adjustments there. Let's watch it just a second longer, because once the flow is going back to normal again, it should be very much fine. So just to make sure, add a small launcher. So it seems to be working just fine, but maybe a bit too close for comfort for my likings. So block it off again, this time at the right spot, and while once again thinking about what to do with this, let's go ahead and build the underground storage. Oh, we haven't even destroyed the entrance to the underground on this side, so let's do that. Also open it up on top here. There's also these 6 little holes we can and will open. These launchers here are no longer needed, so get rid of them and instead build our storage here. Also a bunch of crackstone in the way, so rockets, please help me out. Especially when there's only a single pixel like anywhere left. It's really hard to hit, but I really have to make sure I get them all. For now this size should be fine as a gold storage. So build our filters that only allow gold through. Seal off all the edges and little holes, so no pixel gets stuck, as always, and continue with the next storage. So this storage, has to be a bit bigger, because it's for all the rest. Still a bit more sand on the left side, but this is fine. We're just gonna build our slopes. Also, still 3 air vents blocked, but I guess not anymore. Let's figure out how we wanna deal with all this stuff in here. First I wanted to launch it through the bottom, but I think long term launch it through the top might be better because it will eventually make more space. 3 launchers next to each other should make quick work of this whole pile. And soon we can go ahead and get rid of both of these storages and make a lot more room for our factory. Instead of belting and launching all the gold down, why not go ahead and purchase some more research? Planter boxes we will need very soon, and with the rest of the gold, let's just purchase wall-mounted lights, the vacuum cleaner, and the cryobuster. It already looks a lot cleaner up here, so let's give this shaker one last upgrade. So I think that the only issue that we could still have is that the slag isn't transported off fast enough. Putting up the shaker one tile higher should fix that problem. At least I would think. Also, there isn't really a downside to that. The shaker still has the same length, but we get more room for the slag, which, in my opinion, is a win-win. One last touch to the infeed belt, and we should be open for business again. A quick little launcher, just for good measure, and let's open it up again. In the meantime, nearly everything got transported down underground. Add the collectors back in to count how much gold we have, and take a control flight around the factory. See if everything's working. That clicking sound of the collectors, by the way, also pretty satisfying. For once everything seems to be fine, so let's start building our slag presses. I would like to have 2 of them next to each other to make sure that every slag is getting pressed. The fail rate of slag presses seems to be kind of high, so here we should really make sure to either cycle it back through the factory or just back into the slag press. My preferred way for this factory always has been to just cycle it back into the same production step. So we are continuing with that and do the same right here. But first things first, let's build the slag press. Starting with the burnt slag getting launched up and onto a filter that hopefully spreads out the burnt slag a bit. Build walls around the press so that no burnt slag can escape. At the bottom though, we will leave a small gap so that we can transport off the burnt slag that didn't get pressed. So if it failed to press, it's getting launched to the side and back up again into a second press. I especially chose to not exactly copy the first one because I want to make sure that the press never gets stuck. We are achieving that by making sure that the output of the burnt slag that doesn't get pressed is for sure faster than the one of the first press. Even if the first press gets clogged up at one point, the output of the second is always faster than the first one and therefore will never get clogged up. And there we have our self-sustaining slag press. Only thing to do now is to watch it if it actually works. No fails for now, but I don't really like that the slag can't really fly it to the right side. Shouldn't really cause any issue, but let's revert it to what it looked like before, just to be extra safe. Wow, I'm still not satisfied with our shaker. If I knew that this would be such a mess, I would probably have calculated a lot more space for it. Now that we have our slag press, I think it's finally time to no longer store that much stuff down here. For sure we want to keep the gold down here, but also I would say, as long as we haven't set up our planter boxes and flower burners, we should keep the spores down here, or at least the wet spores. Because our spore washer will be the next part of the factory we are gonna have to build. Grabber is coming in handy right here. Because we didn't plan ahead enough, we now have to move some stuff by hand. The new set of launchers is set up as well and starts throwing out all the stuff that we just put in here. Before all the wet spores escape, quickly grab a filter that only allows wet spore through to keep it in the pit while every single other material is getting transported to the left, and eventually back into the factory again. Oh, and our beloved shaker, still kind of making trouble again. Let's make the entrance into the shaker a bit steeper, to avoid all the slag getting stuck up there. Although I think this got mainly caused by the launcher that was too far on the right side, it is still an adjustment that might be worth to do. Tinkering a bit more, making the right side even steeper, should finally and hopefully do the trick and give this shaker its final form. The time of the washer is near. A filter facing towards left will provide us with a solid guideline for a better view where the washer has to go. We will need a bit more space here, so probably the best idea to move the gold a bit more to the right before it drops down. This should give us enough room to build two spore washers next to each other. First launcher probably good right there. First, I would think we probably have to figure out at which height and where exactly we are gonna drop the spores in that we already created. Build our inlet like in every step before. 3 filters as a floor that only block spore, and 1 filter on the right side that only allows spore. This belt will meet up with the spore that is newly produced. This is our connection point. Now that we know where this point is gonna be, we can solidify our launcher. To give us a bit of breathing room while creating the spore washer, just drop it down momentarily. This is also gonna be a bit of a challenge for me, because like the other steps, I really want to make sure it does fit in this little spot right there. Down in the underground, we can also see that the first recycled material is getting back onto the belts and recycled into the factory. This is a really important step to eventually achieve our first goal, to get rid of all the sand and materials that are currently on the map. The liquid vent is as far to the right as it can be, to hopefully avoid spores to get stuck there. A belt on the floor and launchers above to allow the spores to get moved to the left side and get washed in the process. We need to move it down 1 tile though, because if we don't do that, we can't build our second washer right next to it. In this tight space, the biggest challenge might be to not only secure the functionality, but also make it kind of pleasing to the eyes. Let's run with this for now. The washer should be doing its job like that. And after getting launched up, it might be a good idea to filter out the wet spore that already got washed and drop it down, to only move the dry spore further to the left side where the second washer is gonna be. In this case, we should be fine by just copying the first washer to save a bit of building time, because we only do have to make some small adjustments to fit it in. Just with the finishing touch, there's already a pixel going through to prove at least that we built all the belts and launchers the right way. Building a wall on the left side to avoid other materials getting into this system. A belt down below should do the trick for now to transport the wet spores to the right side again. Although we have no water yet, we can still go ahead and build our inlet. Still, 3 main things left to do. First is to connect the liquid vents with pipes to the infinite water storage. Second one is gonna be to separate the wet spores and the eventually leftover spores that didn't get washed. Pipes are done, so how do we want to separate the spores and the wet spores? I think a filter that only blocks spores at this height might be the best solution, because it also solves the third thing we wanna do, which is to loop the unwashed spores back into the system. The washer finished and working well, we can now add the final touches. We don't need the belt down there anymore, and because we don't have enough space for our planter boxes down there, we can completely finish this part of the factory. By adding the filter that only allows gold, all the gold produced in this part of the factory is being separated and collected on the lowest belt of our above ground factory. And this shall be it for today. While we are taking a quick look around the factory, let me thank all of you for watching until this point. With this episode, I really tried to up the pace of the playthrough. So please let me know what you think of this. Do you like shorter but faster paced episodes, or should I go back to slower pace but longer episodes? Anyways, I really hope you enjoyed watching, and hopefully see you in the next one.